The Legend of Zelda franchise has always been one of my favorites as a little kid. Adventuring as Link in the fantastical world of Hyrule is an experience that has resonated with gamers across the world, but fairly recently there's been a shift to what that adventure looks like. Ever since A Link to the Past release on the Super Nintendo in 1991, Zelda games have stuck to a tried and true formula in game design. You have an overworld where you can travel fairly freely, you have dungeons with many puzzles to solve and enemies to fight, and in those dungeons you can find an item that will help solve more puzzles and also help fight the final boss. You rinse and repeat until the game is over. And that's basically Zelda at its core, at least until Breath of the Wild came out in 2017. Breath of the Wild changed the formula by giving you all the items at the beginning of the game, and giving you a large open world for you to freely traverse. Rather than giving you a linear puzzle to solve, it tells you the problem that you need to solve, and it allows for you to come up with a solution to solve the problem. In order to demonstrate what I'm talking about, let's look at the first few hours of Okarina of Time and Breath of the Wild to see how they do things differently. In Okarina of Time, when you first gain control of your character, you're told to go talk to the Great Deku Tree. On the path to the Deku Tree, there's a little brat in the way that tells you that you can't go forward without a sword and shield. But he doesn't tell you how to get the sword and shield. You can figure out where they are by talking to NPCs, but they're always going to be in those specific locations, so you can just go get them. After you get the sword and shield, you meet with the Deku Tree, and you gain some exposition as to what's going on, and then you go inside the tree to explore your first dungeon. The dungeon is linear in the sense that you have to solve each puzzle sequentially in order to progress. At the end of this dungeon, you fight and defeat Goma, and congrats, you beat the dungeon. Now, with Breath of the Wild, you wake up in a room with no explanation as to where you are or what's going on. You do hear a woman's voice to tell you to pick up an object called the Sheikah Slate and to use it to leave the room. After you leave the cave, you hear the same woman tell you to make it to a marker on a map on the Sheikah Slate. From this point, you're presented with 4 shrines to make your way to and complete. Think of these shrines as smaller dungeons. One shrine in particular is difficult to reach. It's in the snowy region of this area, and you will undoubtedly freeze to death if you just walk there. So you have to figure out how to get there without freezing to death. The game has a few different options that you can choose to get to the place without freezing to death. You could just walk there and just keep eating food to restore your health. You could grab a torch and light it on fire and just hold it out until you reach the shrine. Or you could cook together spicy peppers in order to gain yourself a cold resistant buff. And this is just one of many examples of a problem having many solutions. This game design philosophy has been brought over to its sequel, Tears of the Kingdom, and the newly released game, Echoes of Wisdom. I don't think either approach is better or worse than the other, it just comes down to personal preference. I personally like this new approach, and I'm looking forward to seeing what the future holds for the Legend of Zelda series.